Greetings and welcome to Calm, Clear Conversations. I'm Christopher Johnson, and with me today is, all right, let me see how many I can get in. International best-selling author, business coach and strategist, virtual event producer, executive producer, Robbie Samuels. I'm sure I've left out about 20.
Multi-hyphenate, yes.
There you go. Robbie,
Yes.
it is a pleasure to have a conversation with you.
It's always great to hang out with you, Christopher. Thanks for having me.
All right. So the conversation today centers on, well, yeah, all the hyphens. Not all the hyphens, as many as we can fit in. So I know you through No More Bad Zoom
hmm
and the 5% Advantage program.
hmm
So pivoting is something that you have done throughout your career. You've made pivoting what you do.
Mm.
What were you doing prior to 2020?
Yeah, so pre-pandemic, I spent over a decade teaching people how to network at conferences. I had a talk that I did for about 11 years called Art of the Schmooze. And about half the time I was still employed. And then I left to focus on being a speaker and launched a podcast on the Schmooze, which is nearing 300 episodes. Then I launched my first book, which is all about networking at conferences. I then launched a group coaching program to help people network in business. And then I did a TEDx talk on the topic related to networking at events. So I was poised to be an overnight success, 10 years in the making, had a new talk I was working on, and was ready to share it with the world. March 2020, no one needed any of the things I was known for: eye contact, business cards, shaking hands, body language. So I had to figure out how to show up and add value. And I wrote 9 ways to network in a pandemic and shared that on March 12th, 2020, and got an idea to do one of those things, which was to host a virtual happy hour. Got the idea about 8 p.m. on a Thursday night. And that's how I came to host my first virtual happy hour on Friday, March 13th, 2020 at 5 p.m. Eastern. It was the first sort of open spot in my calendar, and I'm impatient. And I've been hosting it weekly ever since. It's now a free monthly event, and club members get access to the other Fridays. But that is what really, in a sense, launched a whole new business for me. Although when I started that, I wasn't trying to monetize that. In fact, I really haven't tried to monetize that, but it led to several new things, including some you've mentioned, which is the certification program you went through with me, the 5% Advantage program.
And yeah, the 5% Advantage program, I signed up because, well, I had a client and I needed to be able to produce a Zoom event.
Mm.
So you say yes to the opportunity,
Yeah.
then you figure out the how.
I'm curious, now that you have a little bit of distance from having gone through that, and you've subcontracted with me as we produced events for my clients tend to be national and statewide advocacy organizations like charities, nonprofits, associations. So what is your biggest takeaway of having gone through that kind of level of training and feeling ready and getting certified? Like what was sort of helpful in that sense?
Well, one of the biggest takeaways from that program is the familiarity with what it is. And here's what I mean by that. So I come from a broadcast background. That's
Mhm.
my undergrad degree.
Yeah.
The run of show, which is critical to every event, it is critical for a good meeting. There is such a thing. The run of show is very much like a clock hour in radio. Things happen at a particular point in time. It's like, oh, that brought about some familiar. It's like, all right, yeah, I can do this. And the tech, it's like, okay, a background in IT. Yeah, okay, I can do this. All right.
It's interesting in retrospect. You can realize that you are very well suited to be a Zoom producer because of your passion to help people and your comfort level with with IT and technology generally.
Mhm.
Um, And then you add in like your experience with broadcasts. I mean, because part of the work we end up doing is behind the scenes, but a lot of times we play some kind of role in front of the camera, whether it's just introducing like the Zoom overview, orientation, housekeeping. Sometimes it's emceeing or interviewing or just jumping in to fix things as they fall apart. I think that's what you get when you hire a professional Zoom producer versus someone who just like pushes buttons to open up breakout rooms. I think you and I were just chatting about how there was someone that you were working with who just had, three people for 3 minutes was their request in the breakout rooms. And it's always like, what are you trying to achieve? What is the goal of that? And I think that's for me the biggest lesson I've gotten from doing this work since 2020 is my background was in-person events. And there's a way in which sometimes if you do the same event over and over again every year, you stop scrutinizing the why of what you do. And you just sort of say, well, we always put registration right here. And we always put a sign right here. And it's just so much easier to just fall back to the routine of what you've always done, never really sitting back and saying, is that the best option? Is that going to achieve the best outcome? Is that exactly, the flow we want? Is that the whatever, whether it's logistics or the content on the stage? And I feel like one of the things that happened in 2020 and beyond is that we've been shaken up. And so even now, as we go back to in person, we have to again question everything, which I think is high time. Like there's a way in which it's important to do. But for virtual, it really was a landscape that hadn't been fully explored. We really didn't have a lot of good options to look at and say, oh, I really like that, because mostly we had 45 minutes of death by PowerPoint followed by ineffectual Q&A and no one moderating chat, which is the typical webinar format pre-pandemic, which just really wouldn't fly right now.
No, and see, that is something that I love, because before all this changed, people were not engaged that much in in-person events. But now, I mean, there was some, but it seemed to be it wasn't the predominant thought. How can I keep them engaged? Just like, well, all right, how can I convey my information and then, sell my books or CDs at the merch table? Uh, but the virtual environment, you have to engage both audiences, in person and online. You have to keep their attention. You have to make them feel that this is where they belong.
Mm-hmm.
Having
Are you referring to hybrid, or are you specifically talking about like some event in-person events and some virtual events?
Well, see, now as we're changing to more hybrid, yeah, hybrid, you have to take both audiences in account. You have to keep them in mind.
I may be unpopular in this, but I'm not a fan of hybrid in the sense that it's a simultaneous events. And I think that when you have the budget for it, that's different. When you have like the dollars to back your best intentions, because you really do need like a big team, a lot of technology support, and a really creative strategic thinking and willingness to like be nimble and responsive to what's happening in the room, because
Yeah.
someone's going to feel left out. And it's really easy to end up focusing entirely on the in-person community of participants and really lose the people who are coming in from outside. So my recommendation for a hybrid would not be two events that are happening simultaneously. It would be to think about your event just differently. So one of the things that happened in the beginning of the pandemic, Christopher, is that people lamented all the constraints of virtual. Oh, this, oh, that. But what they weren't recognizing, and even I took a while to really fully see this, is that in person also has a ton of constraints. So the very fact that we're meeting in person requires people to travel to a specific location. And it's hard for people to do that. It's expensive, it's time consuming, it takes a ton of energy. So that already will limit some people from even attending. So that's one thing. Then because you can't have people stay there for a month, right? That's like unrealistic. So you say, well, we're going to stay here for 3 days. And then you cram into those 3 days so much content. And I've been to conferences, literally 42 concurrent sessions. Now, it didn't start out that way. I went to that conference for 20 years and eventually it was 42 concurrent sessions. Can you imagine being a first or second timer coming into that space? Literally hundreds of sessions per day to choose from. Too much. So no one was going to tell me that that was an ideal format, but it was the reality now we could design where we have some pre-event sessions that are virtual, that are open to the wider community of members. And we know not everyone's going to come to the in-person, but we create some content and some social connection opportunities leading up. It could be over weeks or even months up to the big main event.
Mhm.
And then you have your 2-day main event, and it's a smaller group of people, and it's a really focused agenda. And you don't try to have like all those concurrent sessions could be taking place for weeks beforehand. And then maybe after, you have sort of a couple of follow-up for people who want to either continue conversations, dive deeper. Maybe that leads into some kind of mastermind opportunity, so that you end up, I mean, you can end up having a 6-month or 3-month cycle of content that builds community with a lot of longevity and really builds relationships over time. And it's in some ways better than the in-person model, because if I meet you once at a conference, I'm not going to stay in touch with you necessarily right away. I might meet you a year later at the conference and then finally start to make plans with you between years 2 and 3. But if you're new, if you're first timers, you're newcomers, if they get connected into a community and have some repeat exposure with other members, that might actually help bring them in and like make them feel like a regular, like contributing member of your community a lot quicker than the annual like show up once. And maybe you're like, the first time it was nearby, so I was willing to drive to it, and then the next time it's expensive because you have to fly. And so there's a lot of reasons that I think blending these two make a lot of sense, these different
Mhm.
modalities, but not necessarily unless you have, deep pockets and a really extensive event team behind you. I would actually caution most people against doing the traditional hybrid.
And I agree completely. It's a budget issue.
Yeah.
And doing hybrid on the cheap is does a disservice to both audiences or all audiences.
Yeah. I mean,
Now,
think about pre-pandemic, there was like the $97 virtual pass, and they would stick a camera in the back of the room and point it towards the stage, and that was basically your virtual pass, and then they would record whatever the video captured, and then they would sell you the replays. And who watches those replays? Let's be real. And who feels like they want to sit in front of a computer watching from the back of a room what's happening on a stage when everyone else is having fun while there? I mean, it's hard to get people to spend synchronous time with you in that way. Like, please be here at noon for this presentation. And it's hard to get really good quality camera work in person unless you have the budget and the team for it. So, yeah, I cut you off though. Sorry, Christopher. I have some
uh,
feelings on the topic.
really, you've managed to hide that. Uh,
Yeah.
so what is a good tip that everyone can be just a little bit better in virtual meetings or virtual webinars?
Well, the very basics. The very basic is look at the camera. I mean, think about this right now. Like the whole time I'm talking to you like this, but if I were actually looking at you where you are on my screen, it would look like this. And that's what everyone else would be seeing too. So why don't you also look at me on your thing? Yeah. So this is actually, even when you're doing lives, this is what it looks like, and this is what people are watching. Whereas you and I are doing this, even though people are watching either this live or they're watching the replay, and hello if you are, this is the simplest, no money, just takes some discipline and some sort of practice, and then it becomes a habit. And so to help you do that, I have coached people through, putting something either right at the top of their computer monitor behind the camera. It could be a post-it note. It could be those like sign here arrows. It could be one of my friends like put a hole in a picture and then put the hole over the camera so she could look up at a loved one. For her, it was a dog. For you, whomever. um, Another friend put googly eyes above the camera so that she could make quote eye contact. Have some fun with it. Like I have a piece of tape. It's not that fancy. But it gets me to focus my eyes where the camera is. And then it's just making it happen. Now, I can still see you nodding along. Like
Mhm.
I have peripheral vision. And so I can still comment on that. Oh, I see someone smiling. So and it's not that you have to stay stuck here. Like you can be like, oh, let me think about that. And then as soon as you start to answer, you want to get back and make your point. You want to like thinking about it, talking about it, and finish with your point. Like just that's the simplest thing. But a loftier thing I want to push us to is to be really thoughtful and strategic about the design of the space and what we want the outcome to be. Purpose first design, I think, is the next level of what we need to be doing with virtual.
And that is one of the many reasons why people should engage with an event producer,
Mm-hmm.
because we can have that conversation. What is it that you're trying to accomplish? What do you want the audience to walk away thinking, doing, saying? What is the end result of them having been here?
Yeah, and my background is many things, but one of them is I am a community organizer, and I taught community organizing at the college level for a few years. And so, moving people to taking action is tricky. And often presentations can make people feel really inspired, but whether it's an in-person event or a virtual one, they may be the only person in that session from their organization, and now they have to figure out how to bring the idea back to their organization, to their team, and get buy-in. And so, spending some time really thinking about what are some reservations that people might have about taking this action, and then having panelists, speakers, guests, experts speak to that as part of their own journey. So not just focusing on the amazing outcome that XYZ person or company has achieved, but talk a little bit about the struggle at the beginning to adopt this, or what were some of the challenges or hurdles they had to overcome to even consider doing this. That will help people in the audience go, oh, I was worried about that, but it seems like we can work around that. And then at the end, spending some time really thinking about like, what are the next steps? What is the next or first step for people to take? What's further research or reading or learning that they can take home with them? What would they want to discuss in a team meeting? What would they need to do in order to be ready to talk about this in a team meeting in 3 weeks, 6 weeks? What allies would they need to get on board? What buy-in might they need? So like it's a little bit of coaching at the end, and it's even saying like pull out your calendar and think about when in the next 2 weeks you're going to actually have time to look at your notes from today's session and put that on your calendar, because so many of us just take in all this content, and some of us take lots of notes, and then we get home and life intervenes, and we're so busy just getting back in to digging at our inbox, and doing laundry and walking our dog and saying hello to our partner, probably in that order, that we that we actually like we forget to take action on the stuff that we learn. And so, how do you want them to be thinking differently, feeling differently, or doing differently, and then designing the session with that in mind. And usually engagement is a piece of this. So like, how are we going to create that engagement? Either it's virtual or in person. Because I do strategy prep sessions for either. And I actually am starting next month, which is, I guess, tomorrow. I'm going to be offering free strategy prep sessions through Live. And if you're in any of my communities, you'll hear about this. You'll see me posting them if you're connected to me on LinkedIn, et cetera. So I'm just going to be offering people a half hour where I'm going to talk through their 60, 75, 90-minute presentation, whether it's in person or online, because it's really important for us to start stepping up. 2020 had its own challenges around how to get into the online space, and we figured out how to meet people. We figured out how to enable breakout rooms. That was really important. In fact, we can't move to the next stage if you haven't already done that. And I've actually created dozens of Zoom tutorial videos, and I think you have a link you can share. I want to help people get their settings right. I want to give people like some DIY tools to help them get better at the basics. The basics include quality online facilitation, setting the Zoom settings so that you know how to manage things. How do you think about breakout rooms? All these different things. And so, but like you said, Christopher, there's a difference qualitatively when you hire a professional to help you produce an event. You're going to get a different level of support than someone who just knows the tech and help you push buttons.
True. And see, here's one of the other things. And one of the things we have in common in this field,
Yeah.
because we are professionals, if something goes awry, because technology does what technology does, there's just a calm voice of reassurance in the room saying, okay, here's what we're going to do. Instead of a panic voice, oh, wait a second, what happened? All right, so oh, you're stuck in a breakout room? Oh man.
I got I got an email from a friend of mine, who's one of our No More Bad Zoom participants. And I see that Jim was just commenting in the comments on one of the channels. So, hey, Jim. But this participant who actually, I'm not going to say more about them, but they were having trouble because one of the people, they were hosting an event and they couldn't turn on their camera. Like they're not them, but like their guest. And they sent an email. I mean, it's a difficult thing. Like that is a legit thing and it will just happen out of nowhere. And this is part of the reason we have our guest experts and our speakers and our team members come early, at least 5 minutes early. 15 would be better. 30 minutes if you really, 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 really want to make sure you get it right. So when I'm paid to do this work, I push for a 30-minute because it only takes 10 minutes to go through and manage everyone and get all their set up. But I have had speakers have to uninstall and reinstall Zoom, restart the computer with like a lot of updates. I've had people really, it would have been a panicky moment, but I'm like, it's fine. And I have their phone number and I can call them and walk them through how to do the steps. So quick answer, if you ever have the issue where you or someone's camera will not turn on, restart that computer. Are there other things you could attempt to do? Yes. The one I know will work 100% of the time, restart the computer. If that doesn't work and you have an external camera, then you got to make sure that wires are connected and all that other stuff. But if it had been working earlier in the day and then it doesn't work for Zoom, that's probably, it's a glitch. Just restart the computer. But that's the kind of stuff that, Christopher, you and I, we just know that we can get people figured out. We can handle it before it becomes even public. No one else needs to see that this was a problem. Keep the tech kind of simple enough that people can focus on delivering their message and leveraging the technical tools, the technology to enhance the experience, not to detract from it.
Exactly. And one of the other benefits of getting there early for speakers is it gives them a moment to get that panic out. It's like, oh, I can just focus on my message. Everything else is taken care of. Okay.
Yeah, like even slides. I don't use slides very often, but I've learned so much about how to do better presentations with slides. I got to coach people. I want to have them slides set up and prepped so they can get right to them. It bothers me. It's honestly, I think, Christopher, I've made a business out of all of my pet peeves.
All right. So a follow-up question just for that.
Yeah.
You've made a lot of businesses.
I have a lot of pet peeves. So, I mean, for instance, if I get on and I see a presenter, I'm a guest, I'm a participant, I mean, in the room, just an audience member. And the person's like, okay, now I'm going to share my slides. Okay. I think I press down here and then okay. And then, okay. Oh, you guys see my slides? And then what we're seeing is their desktop with their slide presentation not yet in presentation mode. And we're seeing the contents of their entire desktop and all the things they had open. And like, there's no need to show that. Like there is a way to skip that step. And if you're listening to this thinking, wait, you can skip that step? Yes. And in fact, I'll even just tell it to you. Before you let everyone in for the waiting room, you share your screen, you have your slides waiting, you hit present on your slides. So now they're in presentation mode. You then stop share. And the next time you share your screen, you choose the presentation, not the desktop. And it will go right to the presentation. We won't see all your apps across the bottom of your screen. If you ever have an issue of weird gray boxes, this will solve that problem. It's just like all these little things, which in the end aren't really little, but it adds up to a lower quality experience for the people in the room. And then the other parts of the pet peeve is like, people saying things like, oh, go ahead and raise your hand in chat. There's never been a raised hand feature in chat. Or when they point to the top right corner in their side, but they say, go to your top right corner, and they're pointing the top left. And so part of Zoom fatigue that we're all fighting is all these moments that don't make sense in our brains. Where either like someone is saying something that is not a right instruction, or they're pointing in a direction that doesn't make sense, and our brains are trying to catch up with it. And that is part of the fatigue. And there's minor things like that. And then there's sort of more egregious things like I was sent to a breakout room, 7 people, 15 minutes, 3 questions. And this to me is like one of these like almost like a math problem. When you're a kid, they would spout these math problems, a train coming from this. It's like that. But right away, you should see this doesn't make sense. And the first of the 3 questions was share a challenge you're facing. So what happened and what happens is the first person shared a challenge, and then we all tried helping. And then there was 3 minutes left. I said, oh, wait, let's just do a quick round robin. And that event had that happen 3 times. And then I went the following week and they did it again. And I'm like, I give up. Like, it's not a way for me to meet people. And then the opposite problem is where there's really no structure, and they just send you into breakout rooms, and there wasn't really a question, or wasn't really defined. It was sort of loosely said, or just like have chit chat amongst yourselves. And then you're all just like, you get in a room and everyone's muted and everyone's like looking at each other. No one wants to be the one who speaks. And then someone grabs the mic and starts to talk. Now, if we're just merely doing this as a checkbox exercise, that is engagement. If that's all we're trying to do. But not everyone felt able or invited to engage. So design is actually a way to really create more equitable access to the conversation, to give more people a way in to hear their voices, which I think ends up creating more value for everyone who attends. So rather than the microphone always defaulting to the people who have the most privilege, the most seniority, the white guy in the room, whatever it is, that default stops happening, and you let people know, here's the order we're going to have you go. Here's the question. Here's an example of an answer for the question. And the question is also being written up and putting in chat. So, I've trained on the how to do, but my new focus right now is writing a book about how purpose-first design and online facilitation lead to intentional engagement and memorable online experiences. And it's a collection of all these little things that we're talking about, with a very clear overarching sense of why are we doing this to begin with, that leads to these really amazing online outcomes. Now, if you're in an industry where you've never had the opportunity to be impressed with how a virtual program is run, and I've still seen that there are some industries that are still doing what they've always done, and they're nervous about giving people access to the mic and put cameras on, then it's really hard to imagine this other world, which is actually why I want to invite folks to come first Friday of every month, No More Bad Zoom Virtual Happy Hour. You can see this in action. You'll get to hear a little bit from me. You'll get to do some breakout rooms with people. You'll hear from a guest expert on a topic around business and entrepreneurship. And then you'll have an opportunity to get into breakout rooms. We get to choose which rooms you go to, and then there'll be Q&A, and it'll be tons of engagement and fun and learning and connections. And so I know that, Christopher, you're great. You've been putting in the link, nomoorbadzooms.com. And that's something that's basically what the first one I ever did, which is March 13th, 2020. It very quickly in a month, it evolved to being that brand. And I really think you have to see it in action to start imagining it for yourself.
I agree completely. And so one of the things that you mentioned, there's Zoom fatigue or virtual meeting fatigue because we have to work too hard mentally because it doesn't look right. It doesn't match what we are expecting. And, going back to broadcasting for a second, we are accustomed to looking at things a certain way. There's
Yeah.
an order, there's a structure. Well done virtual meetings emulate that structure to a degree. I mean, there are things that we can do in virtual meetings that we can't do
Right.
yet in TV, but we are trained to have. It's like, oh, I know. ev- Okay, I understand what's going on.
Well, it's a little bit. I've never been trained in improv, but I've understand enough about improv. There's rules. There's rules to improv, and I feel like that's kind of what once you understand the rules of a quality design and a quality presentation and the quality facilitation, then you get to improv, which is what you and I are basically doing when I'm producing. Like all the best laid plans, right? Like, they don't always get followed to the T. It's that you know. So, for instance, another example of how to really improve your presentation is to design your presentations in modules. So, if something happens and you suddenly have less time or more time, you know how to shift things around, and you don't make the cardinal sin of, oh, folks, if we had more time, I'd be covering this. Let me go past these 6 slides. You know how to pause the slide share and forward it behind the scenes before resharing, or you pull the slides down and forward the slides behind the scenes entirely without any slide showing. Like, there's 2 ways to do that, and you don't let on that anything was missing, and you know which thing to skip, and you make a decision. Like, you were just part of an event last week that you were producing with my team, where there was a plan for a breakout room, but they decided to continue the dialogue, the conversation, the Q&A instead of going breakout rooms. And because they knew the outcome they were aiming for, they knew the purpose of the session, they didn't blindly follow the plan, because they felt like they were in that moment getting that result that they wanted, and it would be
Yeah,
more disruptive to break that moment and get people into rooms again. And
yeah,
when you as a producer can spend time with the speakers ahead of time to get to that level of clarity, you can be nimble on the fly, and it will seem kind of just off the cuff, but it was only possible because of all the planning ahead of time, all the training,
exactly.
all the hours. Like, you don't hire me just for the time I do something. You're hiring for all the training and all the hours and all the practice that I've done before. But that also goes to the speakers. Like, more effort up front will yield better results in the moment.
Absolutely. That exactly. So in the few minutes that we have
Sure.
remaining, what is because I'm a curious person. I'm a voracious reader and books always come up. So last year, I know you increased the number of books you read. This
Mhm.
year, what's the last book that you read that you would recommend?
Ooh, okay. So, I've been reading a lot of fiction, which is really new for me. My wife's been loading up my library, my Libby app, with great fiction, which has just been fun and engaging my brain. And also, it gets me comfortable and ready to read more nonfiction. Interestingly enough, so there's 2 books that come to mind. Uh, One is called Unmasking Autism, which was really interesting. It's about it's written for people who may be autistic, whether or not they've been clinically diagnosed. And I'm always interested in, like, inclusion and designing for more inclusive, like, bring everyone in. And so there were some things, particularly in the last section of the book, where they talked about sort of design and, like, what people need in a room. That here's the thing: if you design with this in mind, you design an experience that everyone will benefit from. It's like giving people having agendas in advance of a meeting is not just good for some people. Everyone benefits from there being an agenda. Sticking to that agenda would also be a thing. Um, Ending a meeting early because a decision's been made rather than staying on longer than necessary, also a good thing for everybody. So there's just small examples. But I think that, I have a kid who's autistic, and so I've been thinking about, like, what is their world like. I've been thinking about that a little bit, and I wanted to just be more prepared. And actually, the other book is The Transgender Child, and I have a kid who's gender expansive, and so it's not surprising that both my nonfiction books this past few weeks have been geared towards things I want to learn as a parent. But I feel like both of these books are helping me be more expansive in just how I create more, not just events and spaces where I invite people in, but I welcome them. That's been a real key distinction for me for a very long time. And I want to, I wanted just to go into knowing that I don't know everything about anything. So I need to like constantly be learning and growing. And then, yeah, I've got a bunch of fun, random, like, you know, mystery. I don't even know about mysteries, but like just different random fiction books and things that my wife like puts in front of me. I am horrible at remembering names of anything. So I can't tell you names of authors, like goes in my head and out.
But those can be added to the comments after we end the broadcast.
Yeah.
Gives you time to look it up. Okay, I understand.
Awesome. Yep. Thank you for putting that in there. Yeah, audiobooks have been my friend, like getting the opportunity to like have something like this that I can just hook in my ear, walk around, tap it on and off as I go, has definitely increased the number of books that I'm consuming.
And well, all right. Do you even have a commute anymore?
I don't. I mean, unless you count like down the stairs, I don't. The only thing I have that really is even close to a commute is now last year 3 times a week, and this year twice a week. I drive my kids to school. One of them to school, like one to a bus stop, one to school. So that is the closest thing I have for like time. You know, so on the way there, I'm trying to talk to my kid, and then on the way back, I've got one earbud in and I'm listening to something. And then, you know, Costco counts as a commute. So I go to Costco and walk around, and that becomes another opportunity to listen. But I'm listening like whenever I have a chance, like while I'm working out or whatever.
Excellent. Well, Robbie Samuels, it is always a pleasure to have a
Always.
conversation with you. I invite everyone to, you're open to connecting on LinkedIn, I
Yeah.
presume.
Thank you. I saw that you put my LinkedIn in chat. I really appreciate that
So
comment.
personalize the connection. Let Robbie know one thing that you got out of this
Yeah, that'd be
conversation.
great.
And also be sure you show up to the first Friday's No More Bad Zoom because, well,
Hey,
gee,
this Friday we have a very special guest. I don't know if
who?
you actually you don't know this because I don't usually announce these things in advance, and now I'm going to make her nervous. Paya Robbins, my virtual assistant since February 2020, who has really come into her own as a business owner, increasing her visibility in so many ways. She's actually doing an IG live with a panel today at 5 o'clock with a group, and then she's presenting with me on Friday afternoon and again Friday evening. So on Friday evening, she's gonna be talking about how to get ready to have a virtual assistant and sort of what things you need to get right in your business and in your mindset to even begin to think about that and like what you would do with a VA. And it's not just that you need to like go and like have money or hire somebody. It's that there's a lot sort of before that. So this is something she knows a lot about. And I thought it'd be an interesting topic for us to sort of discuss as a community because a lot of people who come to these first Fridays are entrepreneurial or entrepreneurs. And, you know, they may not already have teams they've built out. A lot of folks coming like our solopreneurs, and there's a point where it is really handy to have someone help you even just a couple hours a week to kind of move things along. So Paya, shout out to you, and we'll hopefully see everyone join us this Friday.
Wow. I didn't know we were going to get a preview. So,
Yeah.
see, one of the many benefits of showing up
That's right, and sticking around to the end. Thank
and
you so
sticking
much,
around to the end.
Christopher. I love this so much. Thanks for having me on.
A pleasure. Take care. Interested in learning more about any of the items that you've seen in today's session? Leave a comment below. Interested in being a guest? Leave a comment below. I help event planners and organizers produce virtual events. Learn how I can support your virtual event by connecting or leaving a comment. Thanks for watching.